I never expected to find my girlfriend of 3 years and my best friend of 12 years naked in our bed. Walking through that bedroom door felt like stepping into an alternate universe, but the real shock came from Brianna's reaction. Instead of panic or shame, she looked me dead in the eyes with a smirk and said, "Perfect timing. We were just talking about how bad you are in bed." Something snapped inside me at that moment. No yelling, no confrontation. I silently took out my phone, snapped a clear picture of them together, and walked out. 2 days later, after I sent that photo to his wife and her conservative religious parents, my phone exploded with their desperate messages. Let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had to deal with betrayal from someone you trusted completely. To understand the full impact of that betrayal, you need to know the history between the three of us. I met Brianna during my second year of college at a mutual friend's Halloween party. I was dressed as Clark Kent, mid-transition to Superman dress shirt open to reveal the iconic S underneath. She approached me with a playful smile, dressed as Wonder Woman, and said, "Looks like the Justice League is recruiting tonight." That clever opening line led to a conversation that lasted until the party shut down at 2 in the morning. Brianna was studying psychology, passionate about eventually working with children who had experienced trauma. Her eyes lit up when she talked about making a difference in young lives. I was majoring in computer science, already working part-time at a local tech company. We exchanged numbers that night, and I called her the very next day, breaking the 3-day rule my friends insisted was crucial. Our relationship developed quickly. Within 3 months, we were officially a couple, spending most of our free time together. By the 1-year mark, we had created countless inside jokes, established favorite restaurants, and developed the kind of comfortable rhythm that made it feel like we had known each other our entire lives. After graduation, when I was offered a full-time position at the tech company, Brianna supported my decision to accept it, even though it meant staying in our college town, rather than moving to the city where she had been offered a position. At a children's mental health clinic. "We can make it work," she had said confidently. "This is too good an opportunity for you to pass up." Her willingness to compromise for my career seemed like proof of her commitment to our relationship. As for Mike, he had been my best friend since sophomore year of high school. We bonded initially over a shared love of obscure science fiction movies and gaming. But our friendship deepened through the typical teenage trials of first heartbreaks, family conflicts, and the uncertain transition to adulthood. When I chose to attend a local state university, Mike followed, though he changed majors twice before settling on business management. Mike was always the more outgoing of the two of us, charismatic, quick, with jokes, and able to work any room like he owned it. Where I sometimes struggled with social anxiety, Mike effortlessly attracted attention and admiration. I often joked that being his friend was like having a social translator, someone who could bridge the gap between my more introverted nature and the wider world. He met Ashley during our junior year at a campus fundraiser. She was striking, tall, athletic, with a confidence that matched his own. Their chemistry was immediately obvious to everyone, including me. They dated throughout college and married a year after graduation, in a lavish ceremony where I served as best man. "You are the brother I got to choose," Mike said in his wedding speech, raising a glass in my direction. "When I have kids someday, I want them to call you uncle." The sincerity in his voice had brought tears to my eyes. That kind of loyalty and connection felt rare and precious. Given this history, it made perfect sense when I suggested that Brianna and I move in with Mike and Ashley temporarily after graduation. They had purchased a house with extra bedrooms, and we were all trying to establish ourselves professionally while managing student loan payments. The arrangement would benefit everyone financially, and seemed like an extension of the closeness we already shared. The first 6 months of cohabitation went smoothly. We established household rules, split bills equitably, and enjoyed weekly game nights and shared meals. Brianna and Ashley developed their own friendship, occasionally shopping together or attending yoga classes. From the outside, we probably looked like the perfect example of young adults successfully navigating the transition to post-college life. Looking back now, there were warning signs I completely missed. I was working long hours at the tech company, eager to prove myself and earn advancement. This left Brianna and Mike alone in the house frequently, as Ashley's job in pharmaceutical sales required regular overnight trips. When I would return home, exhausted, Brianna would sometimes seem distant or irritable, which I attributed to her own stress at work. If I noticed that she and Mike seemed to share more inside jokes than before, I thought it merely reflected the additional time they spent in the same household. There were more specific incidents I should have questioned. Once I returned from work earlier than expected to find them quickly separating on the couch, an awkward energy in the room. "We were just watching that show You Hate, Brianna," explained with a laugh that sounded slightly forced. Another time I noticed Mike's hand lingering on her shoulder a beat too long when passing her a drink at a dinner party. Ashley had actually voiced concerns once, mentioning casually that Mike and Brianna seemed pretty chummy. At the time, I had dismissed her observation as simple jealousy, even feeling slightly defensive of Brianna. "They live in the same house." "Of course they are friendly," I had replied, effectively shutting down a conversation that might have revealed the truth much earlier. By our second year in the shared house, Brianna began suggesting we find our own place. "We need our space as a couple," she insisted, which seemed reasonable enough. What struck me as odd was Mike's immediate objection, citing financial benefits of continuing our arrangement. Brianna quickly backed down from the idea after a private conversation with him that I was not part of claiming she had reconsidered the financial aspects. Around the same time, I began noticing changes in Brianna's behavior toward me. Our physical intimacy decreased, with Brianna frequently claiming exhaustion or headaches. When we did have sex, she seemed mentally elsewhere, going through motions rather than being truly present. If I suggested trying something new to reignite our passion, she would shut down the conversation with vague criticism of my performance or creativity. "Not everyone can be naturally gifted in that department," she said once with a strange smirk that left me feeling inadequate and confused. The comment lingered in my mind, but rather than addressing it directly, I retreated into work even more, creating a cycle of increased distance between us. 8 months before the incident that ended everything, we finally moved into our own apartment, a one-bedroom unit, about 15 minutes from Mike and Ashley's house. I had hoped the privacy and independence would strengthen our relationship, but instead Brianna seemed increasingly detached. She began working late more frequently and attending girls' nights with coworkers I had never met. Her phone became a closely guarded possession, always face down, and with newly added password protection. When I expressed concern about the growing distance between us, Brianna would turn the conversation around, suggesting that my work schedule was the real problem. "You are married to your job," she accused. "I am just trying to build my own life, since you are never around." The criticism stung particularly because it contained enough truth to make me question my own perceptions of the problems in our relationship. Despite these issues, I remained committed to making things work. I began making a conscious effort to leave work on time, planning date nights, and trying to rebuild the connection we seemed to be losing. Brianna participated in these efforts half-heartedly, often checking her phone throughout our dates or finding reasons to cut our time together short. Mike's presence in our lives remained constant, though his friendship with me had subtly shifted. Our one-on-one time had virtually disappeared, replaced by couple activities that always included Brianna and sometimes Ashley. He began making subtle comments about my career focus that echoed Brianna's criticisms, suggesting a level of private conversation about me that made me increasingly uncomfortable. 2 weeks before I discovered the truth, I noticed a text notification on Brianna's phone while she was in the shower. The message from Mike read, "Only miss you already. A was suspicious about," before cutting off. When Brianna emerged from the bathroom and found me looking at her phone, she snatched it away with unexpected anger. "Privacy is important in a relationship," she snapped. That could have been something private about a client. Her reaction seemed disproportionate, but when I tried to ask about the message specifically, she dismissed it as work coordination, since Mike's company sometimes contracted with her clinic for employee assistance program services. I wanted to believe her explanation. The alternative meaning of that message was too painful to consider directly. Instead, I buried my suspicions and redoubled my efforts to save what I increasingly feared was a relationship already lost. The day I discovered them together started like any other Tuesday. I left for work at 7:30 in the morning, kissing a half asleep Brianna goodbye. She murmured something about having a lunch meeting and then planning to work from home in the afternoon. I remember thinking it was nice that her job offered that flexibility, something my own position rarely allowed. My day at the office was progressing normally, until approximately 2 in the afternoon, when a server crash brought all development work to a halt. After determining that the issue would require at least 4 hours to resolve, our team manager told everyone to go home for the day and resume fresh in the morning. "No point in all of you sitting around watching progress bars," he said with a wave of dismissal. "Consider it a gift of free time." Under normal circumstances, I would have been thrilled with an unexpected half day. I immediately thought about surprising Brianna, perhaps suggesting an impromptu late lunch at the cafe she loved downtown. I even stopped at a flower shop on the way home, purchasing a small bouquet of sunflowers, her favorite. As I parked in front of our apartment building, I noticed a familiar vehicle, Mike's distinctive blue Jeep Wrangler, impossible to mistake for any other car in our social circle. A small voice in my head suggested a perfectly innocent explanation. Perhaps he had also finished work early and was visiting Brianna to discuss an upcoming birthday surprise for Ashley. I had mentioned to both of them that I wanted to organize something special for her 30th birthday the following month. Yet as I climbed the stairs to our second-floor apartment, flowers in hand, a heaviness settled in my chest. Something felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. I inserted my key as quietly as possible, some instinct telling me to minimize noise. The apartment was silent. As I entered, no television sounds or conversation audible from the living room. I set down my computer bag and the flowers on the kitchen counter, noticing 2 wine glasses with residual red wine still evident. Brianna rarely drank during the day, claiming it made her drowsy and unproductive. As I moved toward the bedroom, I heard it muffled laughter, then a distinct moan that was unmistakably Brianna's. My body went cold time, seemingly suspended as I stood frozen in the hallway. Part of me wanted to turn around, walk out, and pretend I had never come home early. Another part needed to see with my own eyes what I already knew in my heart. I pushed the bedroom door open without knocking. The scene branded itself into my memory in vivid detail. Brianna straddling Mike on our bed, both completely naked, her head thrown back in apparent ecstasy. The bed sheets I had washed just 2 days prior were tangled around them. On the nightstand sat a bottle of expensive champagne I had been saving for our upcoming anniversary. Time seemed to slow down as they became aware of my presence. Mike's expression transformed from pleasure to shock to something resembling shame in the span of seconds. He pushed Brianna off him, awkwardly grabbing at the sheets to cover himself. Brianna's reaction was entirely different and infinitely more painful. Rather than showing embarrassment or remorse, her initial surprise quickly shifted to a smirk that communicated something beyond mere infidelity. There was cruelty in that expression, a deliberate twist of the knife. Looking directly at me, she said those words that would echo in my mind for months afterward. Perfect timing. We were just talking about how bad you are in bed. The calculated nature of the comment made it clear this wasn't just physical betrayal but emotional as well. They had discussed me, compared me, mocked me. The 2 people I trusted most had not only betrayed my trust, but had taken pleasure in diminishing me when I wasn't present. Mike finally found his voice. "Man, this is not what it looks like," he stammered, delivering perhaps the most cliched line possible for the situation. I said nothing. A strange calm descended over me, the kind of clarity that sometimes comes in moments of extreme stress. Without breaking eye contact with Brianna, I pulled my phone from my pocket, opened the camera app, and took a clear, unmistakable photo of them together in our bed. The flash went off, documenting their expressions, a mixture of surprise and dawning horror as they realized what I had done. Then, without a word, I turned and walked out of the room, out of the apartment, and down to my car. Behind me, I could hear scrambling movements and Mike's voice calling my name, but I didn't look back. I started my car and drove away, my mind surprisingly empty of coherent thought. I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, eventually finding myself at a park where Brianna and I had once spent summer afternoons reading under a particular maple tree. The irony of unconsciously selecting this location wasn't lost on me. I sat on a bench, finally allowing the emotions to surface: anger, humiliation, grief, and beneath it all, a profound sense of betrayal that seemed to hollow out my chest. My phone began vibrating with incoming calls and texts almost immediately. I glanced at the screen long enough to see both their names appearing repeatedly before silencing it and placing it face down on the bench beside me. Whatever explanations or justifications they wanted to offer, I wasn't ready to hear them. As the initial shock began to fade, questions flooded my mind. How long had this been happening? Was it just physical, or were there deeper feelings involved? Had they been laughing at me throughout our time living together? Was Ashley aware, or was she being deceived just as thoroughly as I had been? The sunlight began to fade as I sat there processing the collapse of both my relationship and my closest friendship simultaneously. Eventually, practicalities asserted themselves. I needed a place to sleep, clothes for work tomorrow, some plan for immediate next steps. I called the only person I felt I could trust with the raw, humiliating truth. a cousin who lived about 30 minutes away. Thomas answered on the second ring, and something in my voice must have communicated the severity of the situation, because he immediately offered his spare room without pressing for details. "Whatever you need, man," he said simply. "The door code is 4721. Let yourself in, if I am not back from work yet." That night, lying on Thomas's futon, staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. I would not engage in a dramatic confrontation. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me emotionally broken. Instead, I would respond with calculated precision, ensuring they faced consequences for their actions from the people whose opinions actually mattered to them. The photo I had taken would be my only reply to their betrayal. By morning, I had 43 missed calls and 67 text messages from Brianna and Mike combined. I scrolled through them without opening. Any noting the progression from defensive anger. "How dare you? Just take a picture and walk out," to attempted justification. "It just happened. We never meant to hurt you," to desperate pleading. "Please talk. To us, we can explain." Not once did I see a simple, straightforward apology. At Thomas's suggestion, I took a personal day from work, using some of my accumulated time off to begin sorting out practical matters. First, I made an appointment with my bank to remove Brianna from my accounts. While she had her own separate accounts, we had created a joint checking account for household expenses that I needed to address immediately. Next, I contacted my landlord to discuss the apartment situation. Fortunately, while both our names were on the lease, I had been the one making payments from my account. The landlord was surprisingly understanding when I explained the situation in the most basic terms possible, agreeing to work with me on either finding a new place or removing her name from the current lease, depending on how things unfolded. The third call was to a locksmith. By early afternoon, the locks on the apartment had been changed, and I had returned with Thomas to pack essential items while Brianna was at work. We were efficient and focused, gathering my clothes, important documents, and irreplaceable personal items like family photographs and the watch my grandfather had left me. I deliberately left all gifts from Brianna and anything we had purchased together. As we finished loading my car, Mike's Jeep pulled into the parking lot. He jumped out, his expression a mixture of anger and panic as he spotted us. "You changed the locks," he demanded, striding toward us. "That is illegal. You cannot just lock her out of her own apartment." Thomas stepped between us, his physical presence alone enough to make Mike reconsider his aggressive approach. "You might want to back up and rethink your current life choices," Thomas said calmly, "starting with whether making this public scene helps your situation." Mike's gaze darted around the parking lot, suddenly aware that neighbors might be watching. His voice lowered, but the desperate edge remained. "Look, what happened was wrong, I know that. But you need to talk to us. Brianna is falling apart. Ashley keeps asking where I was yesterday, and I do not know what to tell her." "That sounds like a personal problem," I replied, speaking to him directly for the first time. "I am sure you will figure something out. You two seem good at keeping secrets." As we drove away, Mike called after us. "This is not over. You cannot just ghost on 3 years like this." What Mike and Brianna didn't yet realize was that I had no intention of ghosting. I simply had different plans for how this would conclude. Back at Thomas's apartment, I sat down with my laptop and the photo I had taken. The image was crystal clear, leaving no ambiguity about what had been happening. Both their faces were clearly visible, as were their entwined, naked bodies on my bed. Part of me felt uncomfortable using the explicit image, but I reminded myself that they had chosen to create this situation, not me. First, I needed to find Ashley. While I had her number, I suspected Mike might be monitoring her phone. Instead, I located her work email through a simple LinkedIn search. I composed a brief factual message: "Ashley, I apologize for contacting you this way. Yesterday, I came home early to find Mike and Brianna together in my bed. I believe you deserve to know the truth." The attached image confirms what I found. "I am sorry to be the bearer of this news." I hesitated briefly before hitting send, knowing this would cause her pain. But I also believed firmly that she deserved to know the truth about the man she had married. The information would allow her to make informed decisions about her own life, just as the discovery had forced me to reconsider mine. Next, I turned my attention to Brianna's parents. Though I had only met them a handful of times due to geographic distance, I knew they were deeply religious people who had raised Brianna with strict moral expectations. Their disapproval was something she feared more than almost anything else. I had their email address from a holiday gathering we had coordinated the previous year. The message I sent them was similarly straightforward, though I used a slightly different crop of the image. That still made the situation clear, but was less explicitly sexual, out of respect for their sensibilities. Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, I regret that this is how we must part ways. Yesterday, I discovered Brianna's infidelity with my former best friend. I believe you should be aware of the real reason our relationship has ended. I have always respected your family and wish you well. With both messages sent, I blocked Brianna and Mike's numbers on my phone and deactivated my social media accounts temporarily. I needed space to process without their attempts to control the narrative or pressure me into a response that would make them feel better about their actions. The next day, I returned to work telling colleagues only that Brianna and I had broken up and I was staying with family temporarily. Most respected my obvious desire for privacy, though a few closer work friends expressed concern about my subdued demeanor. For approximately 48 hours, there was radio silence from both Brianna and Mike. I later learned from Thomas, who had mutual friends with Mike, that this time was spent in desperate damage control. Mike had apparently concocted an elaborate lie for Ashley about helping Brianna move furniture when I walked in and misinterpreted the situation. Brianna had called in sick to work and spent a day frantically trying to contact her parents, whose initial response had been to stop taking her calls. The dam broke on the evening of the second day. Unable to reach me by phone due to the blocks, they resorted to email text messages to Thomas, and even a handwritten note left on my car in the work parking lot. The desperation was palpable, but notably, the messages focused primarily on their own predicaments, rather than the harm they had caused. From Mike, Ashley has kicked me out and is talking to a divorce lawyer. My parents are not speaking to me. You have destroyed my life over one mistake. How could you send that picture to my wife? From Brianna. My parents have canceled my graduate school tuition payments and are telling extended family I am having some kind of breakdown. What you did is unforgivable. That picture was private, and sending it to my parents is sick revenge. The irony of them characterizing my actions as revenge when I had simply shared the truth with affected parties was not lost on me. Neither was the fact that both seemed more disturbed by the consequences of their actions being revealed than by the actions themselves. The most telling message came from Brianna late that night. What I said when you walked in was just shock talking. You know I didn't mean it. We were good together, and throwing away 3 years over one afternoon is immature. Mike means nothing to me. It was just physical. Call me so we can talk about this like adults. Her message confirmed what I had already suspected. The cruelty had been intentional, designed to hurt me in the moment, but now that consequences had arrived, she was attempting to minimize both the infidelity and the deliberate emotional damage. I deleted each message without response. In the weeks and months that followed, I focused entirely on rebuilding my life from the ground up. Thomas generously allowed me to stay with him until I found a new apartment, a small but modern one-bedroom unit in a different part of town. I threw myself into work, earning a promotion that had been on the horizon before the breakup. The additional responsibilities provided welcome distraction during what would otherwise have been lonely evenings. News filtered back to me through mutual acquaintances about how things had unfolded for Brianna and Mike. Ashley had indeed filed for divorce, discovering during the process that the affair had been going on for at least 7 months, including during the time we all lived together. Brianna's parents had eventually resumed contact with her, but had made their financial support contingent on her attending counseling with their pastor. Mike reached out once more approximately 4 months after the incident, with what appeared to be a genuine attempt at apology. I know nothing I say can undo the betrayal, he wrote in an email that somehow made it through my filters. But I want you to know that I take full responsibility for destroying our friendship and betraying your trust. The person I was with, Brianna, is not someone I recognize or respect. I hope someday you might find it possible to forgive me. Not for my sake, but for your own peace. I read the message twice before deleting it without response. Perhaps someday forgiveness might be possible, but I wasn't interested in absolving him to ease his conscience. My healing needed to happen independently of his redemption narrative. Brianna's final attempt at contact came 6 months after our breakup, when she appeared unexpectedly at my new apartment. How she obtained the address remains a mystery, though I suspect a well-intentioned mutual friend may have been manipulated into sharing it. Standing in my doorway, she looked different, somehow smaller, and less certain than the woman who had smirked at me from our bed half a year earlier. I just need to say this to your face, she began when I reluctantly opened the door. What happened with Mike, and what I said that day, it came from a place of deep unhappiness and insecurity. I wanted to hurt you because I was hurting. It was unforgivable, I know that now. But I need you to know that those cruel words weren't true. They were designed to wound you, not to reflect reality. I listened silently, feeling strangely detached from both her words and the emotions they were intended to evoke. When she finished speaking, I simply said, "Thank you for your honesty. I wish you well in your life, Brianna, but that life no longer includes me. Please don't come here again." The closure I felt as I closed that door wasn't about her apology or explanation. It came from within, from the realization that her words, true or false, no longer held power over my sense of self-worth or happiness. The process of rebuilding trust in others and myself has been gradual. I started seeing a therapist initially to process the trauma of the betrayal, but eventually to understand patterns in my own behavior that had led me to miss or dismiss warning signs in both relationships. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during my years with Brianna, rebuilding a support network based on genuine mutual respect. Approximately a year after the breakup, I cautiously began dating again. My first few attempts were awkward and tentative, the ghost of betrayal, making vulnerability difficult. But, with time and intentional effort, I found myself able to share my story without it defining me or my expectations of others. Today, nearly 2 years after walking into that bedroom, I can honestly say I am in a better place than I was even before the betrayal. The relationship I'm currently in is built on a foundation of radical honesty and clear boundaries, a direct response to the lessons learned through pain. My career has flourished with the energy I once poured into a fundamentally broken relationship. Most importantly, I've developed a stronger sense of self-worth that isn't dependent on others' validation or approval. I occasionally hear updates about Brianna and Mike through the inevitable social connections that remain despite my best efforts to create distance. Brianna eventually moved to another state for a fresh start. Mike's divorce was finalized with financial terms that reflected Ashley's anger and sense of betrayal. Last I heard, he was living with his parents and working at a different company. His once promising career trajectory interrupted by the personal chaos he had created. I take no pleasure in their struggles, but neither do I feel responsible for them. The consequences they experienced were the natural results of their own choices, not of my decision to reveal the truth to those who deserve to know it. If there's a lesson in this painful chapter of my life, it's that betrayal reveals fundamental truths about character, not just of those who betray, but also of the person betrayed. We cannot control others' actions or decisions, but we absolutely can control how we respond to them. Dignity in the face of humiliation, truth in the face of deception, and quiet strength rather than vengeful rage. These were the choices that ultimately allowed me to reclaim my power and rebuild my life. Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you deeply trusted? How did you handle the aftermath? And what did you learn about yourself in the process? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this account resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about navigating life's unexpected challenges. Share with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible even after the deepest betrayals. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that how others treat you reveals their character, not your worth.